You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, my guest is a fellow business coach, advisor, sensei, guru, whatever you want to call him. Like an old friend of mine always said, I don't care what they call me, just as long as they pay my check. But anyway, his name is Dan Tocchini. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Doug. I'm looking forward to it.
And I kind of glossed over your pedigree, but it is vast and significant. Tell folks a little bit about your background and your journey into the work you're doing now.
I came out of an entrepreneurial family. My father's a first generation over here from the old country, from Italy. And both my mother's family and my mother's family is Basque. They came over, they're entrepreneurs. So I grew up in a very entrepreneurial environment. Tough childhood. My mother was a bipolar schizophrenic. It happened after the birth of my youngest brother. I have two brothers and a sister, and I'm the oldest. So I became kind of the go-between between her and the psychiatrist and my father, just because there was all kinds of shenanigans going on. So I got very interested in human performance and how to connect with my mom and how to work with her when things got bad. And I learned at a young age. I started reading. I think at 12 I read Gestalt therapy verbatim, and I got into neuro-linguistic programming at 14, and reading research papers and all kinds of stuff. But very profound impact on my life, both those experiences. Both my dad, I was reading leases at 12 and 13. I learned to run a projection booth because my dad's in the movie business at a young age, and ran the box office and learned how to count money. And I'll never forget, he taught us how to do double entry book system. So I just had a lot of training growing up, and a real interest in how relationship affects action. On a team, in a business. Later on in my life, I got involved in the human potential movement, and I started a coaching company back in 1982, and it was a little early. Business owners they were like, "We're not athletes," and I used to try to pitch them on, "Hey, look, a team hires a great talent. They give them 2 or 3 coaches to develop that talent to get the edge. We ought to be doing the same thing in business." And it didn't click. It was too early. So I went back to consulting, and eventually, the times caught up and was able to start doing that. I have a number of businesses, and a coach, a trainer, done a lot of work internally with teams. On the outside of this, I do work with kids coming out of gangs, working with them, re-entering, that kind of stuff. So I've done a lot of work around human performance, humans making changes or transformations in their lives, using the things, the talents that got them into trouble are also talents that can get them into good situations and make a difference, if you would. So yeah. That's my background.
Fascinating, and it is interesting, and yet again, another story of sort of necessity is the mother of invention, right? Your
exactly
experiences really shape and steer your direction of where you might go and what you might get into. And I'm fascinated by your comment about the 80s being a little early for the coaching movement, and I agree. Having been in business at that time, and still in the 80s for me, I was more in the corporate realm. I was still working for what was ultimately J.P. Morgan Chase. I was part of a local regional bank that ultimately got merged into what we now know as Chase. And we would hire people to come in, and the HR folks would bring them in, but it wasn't really that coach moniker wasn't really the name yet. It was kind of an Uber consultant advisor type. And I don't know what we would have felt about coach. I don't recall the specific discussion about coach being the title, but Anyway, we did have it was organizational development, organizational behavior,
Right.
and things of that sort.
That's how we positioned ourselves, organizational development. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting time. Well, as you've come forward, I guess I kind of want to jump straight to a question. Can you describe what you think the significant changes in business have been over the last, I don't know, 6 to 8 years? What have you observed that? Do you see the needle moving a certain way, one way or the other, in respect to business management, business leadership?
Yeah. I have a business I'm invested in. It's called Incarnate, and it's the first digital employee we're actually producing. In fact, we're in the midst of negotiating 2 major contracts. And while I think AI and automations, those types of things they're impacting business already. But it doesn't, most people think, oh, it's going to invalidate human beings. No, actually not. I think it's going to enhance human behavior. At least that's what I've experienced thus far. Like I use AI to help me think through very difficult, complex problems, people problems as well. And I've come up with prompts to do that, ways that I normally think that when I get them all mapped out and I give it to the AI, it can help me remember certain distinctions that are going to serve me in serving somebody else. So I think when you see the automation, you see all the incredible inventions that have occurred since 1980, pretty amazing from the computer on. I think the worry that people have about the invalidation of human presence is, I think it's invalid. I think we're going to see the opposite. I think we're going to see humans being able to be freed up more creatively. And I think the conventional way of thinking, particularly around fitting in and making sure you're a part of the how would you say it, the status quo. I think we're going to have a chance now to break out of the status quo. People can begin to offer ideas and such that could be thought of in the past as crazy, and be able to put technology behind it to help them make the idea more palatable when they present it. So I see that happening now in my own businesses and the people I coach. I think the other thing is, I think the most important thing is leaders have a tough time, in my experience. I find myself spending 90% of my conversations in helping them think about how to have the hard conversations that are necessary for the business to move on. And what they tend to want to do is go to low-hanging fruit, and they work around the hard conversations, which sends a signal that they're not willing to have them, which inevitably, it's like when they talk about the elephant in the room, well, the elephant usually starts as a mouse and it grows into an elephant. And,
Right.
One of our sayings is, let's ride the elephant, because that's where we're going to get the biggest pop. And how to think about that, most of the leaders I coach, and I coach from Fortune 100 down to your everyday, entrepreneur, that's a big issue. And they have all kinds of strategies and defense mechanisms to keep themselves from taking the risks that they're going to need to take. And one of the things I illuminate is that what you don't face now will eventually defeat you. And in fact, the longer you don't face it, the greater the prices mount. So if you can get people to see that, it increases their courage. If they can see that ultimately waiting is going to be much worse than dealing with it now, they have a lot more courage. I think courage is just basically, let's take care of the problem that's going to hurt us the most now. And if you can get that, and to have that kind of conversation takes both some science and some art.
I agree. And you packed several things in there. Let me do a little bit of unpacking now. First, on the AI front, I stay in tune, and I consider myself an early adopter. I've been working with various elements of AI now for about a year myself, and I agree with you. I find that it really enriches some of the creative work I'm trying to do and things I'm trying to assemble, both in a kind of a research way and a teaching, coaching way. But I know there's a lot of fear because there's headline press. I know Mark Zuckerberg took a stand a week or so ago and said marketing and advertising as we know it is dead. We're never going to have to hire an ad creative person again, and AI is going to do all of that. And even in the literal sense, if that becomes true in some form, that's no different from what we have done generationally in the workplace. I vividly remember 15, 20 years ago talking to job seekers during the crash of '08 when people were scrambling to find new work, but what was emerging, there were new job descriptions we had never had before.
Yeah.
And people were going, what's this? I don't know this. I'm not ready for this. I'm not trained for this. Okay, that might all be true, but this notion of certain job titles and job classes just evaporate and go away. They do. They have been doing it for 100 years. I mean,
That's right. They just
we don't have steam engine operators anymore,
That's right. We don't have printing presses anymore.
That's right.
Yeah.
And typesetters and,
That's right.
A lot of job descriptions evolve. And I think AI is yet another framework from which new job descriptions will emerge and, totally 100% replacing workforces. Now, I have talked to a couple of small business minded people, and I don't mean small minded people, but people focused on small business.
Small businesses, yeah.
And they have said, I think I can build a whole company without any employees. I will just have AI bots do this. And my general reaction to that is good luck.
Yeah.
Wish you well. Because I think somewhere in our human dynamic, there is still going to be the ever-present need that humans want to connect with humans whether it's transactional or strategic in the work that they're doing. I think there's still that desire for connection and getting 100% comfortable and adopted into the notion of simply talking to a screen to do your work. I happen to believe we're not going to get quite there. I think that companies that are still going to maintain some notion of human-centric connection are going to be the winners when all this is said and done.
Well, I think you're right. I have a client who is hiring us on, our AI. It's an agent. It actually executes, and it's called the Meat Gap because this company it's a very large payment company. They do about $500 million a year, and they've got about a $30 million a year budget that they use to have humans take raw data from one app and put it into another app. And what they're doing is they're going to use us to replace those people, but they're going to take those people and put them in the customer-facing jobs because they know that that'll be the edge over the client. And they're going to save $20 million a year doing that. Because they're going to be able to take these people and put them in front of the customers, and that generates revenue for them. So, I mean, these are people. There's a lot of thinking going on how to integrate AI and technology so that it improves the customer experience rather than just the bottom line. And they know that if the customer experience is enhanced, the top line grows exponentially. And if operationally you can cut with AI, then your profit margin, the bottom line is going to grow exponentially. And it's been fun watching them do that. It's interesting.
Right. Well, the other thing that I think goes synonymously with this notion of bringing AI into the mix, I've taken the position and I've made the statement publicly, and even in my coaching, I've applied it. I encourage business owners and leaders to consider AI just another part of your talent stack at your company. We talk about the technology stack we may operate with.
Right on.
But I think there's a talent stack that needs to be considered. And we know it intuitively when we think about our businesses. We look at the different roles and levels and functions we've got going on, and we've got junior people and middle people and senior people, and that creates this stack of talent that's in the business. I would argue that AI is just another element in that stack. And the question is, where do
How
you
you use
deploy
it.
it? How do you use it?
Well, and then there's a distinction in AI because there's AI, and then what's coming out are agents, and we've been beating the pants off of open source, open AI's Sierra, which is supposedly a platform for agents, but they haven't really mastered it. They have, and my son's a brilliant engineer, but he architected something completely different. And his point was AI is useful for analytics, useful for writing and breaking down problems, but an agent does that and then can act on it. And he's created an AI or an agent, an artificially intelligent agent, that you can tell it what to do. So for instance, I could say, if we were talking to it, I could either, you engage right now, all of the AI that you want to use, you have to get on and use another app. You got to get on OpenAI's app or Entropic's app, or, you name a bunch of them. There's Grok. And what he's created is an AI that you talk to like you would any other human. You can call it, you can send it a text, you can email. It has its own email, its own accounts, and you give it orders. You tell it. Like if I said, "Hey, look, go to Doug's Twitter feed and give me his last 5 posts. I want you to give me a synopsis. Put it up as a doc on Google. Send Doug, myself, and our 2 of our employees an invite to that into that doc. Make it so that they can edit it. Then put a calendar date so that we can sit down and discuss what we read, and send us each a bill for $100." And it does it. And it does it 100% accuracy. And that's not been out there. And so to be able to do that, pretty soon, what we're seeing, and this has not been talked about, we say, you're not going to want to use your apps anymore. You're just going to talk to your agent, and your agent will have those apps in its
Find the apps, yeah.
And they'll run the apps, so that you just give it the creativity, and it goes out and does the work for you.
Right.
And that's really going to be, that's probably the next step.
And it is, I guess it's maybe not too big a stretch of an analogy, but it's almost like that custom craftsman. You want to come in and you say, "I want to remodel my kitchen, and I need a cabinet over here and a sink over there and another thing over here." And you're not going to tell them which tool to use. Oh, now you use the saw, now you use the drill. You're going to just say, "Here's what I need." And you're going to look to them and trust their craftsmanship and their knowledge of the tools to use at the right time.
Right.
To come in and get the best work done. And we've been doing that for decades, so.
Yeah, right. And it'll come back with suggestions, right? Which will be great. Like, "Oh, you want it here, but how do you want it to look? You want it to look like this? You want it to look like that?" So
Right.
that's the beauty of it, which then frees your creativity up, right? I mean,
Right.
you've got, like you said, to your point, you're enhanced, and you don't have to go through all the tedium of setting it up, but you can begin to work and model what you want. And
Right.
that's exciting. The key, though, I use it quite a bit too, is in how to have conversations with people. Like if I'm going to talk to Doug about his lack of performance in a certain place, or a possibility where I see he could be even more effective. How do I do that? Given who Doug is and what I know about Doug, I can give that information. It could help me think about how to talk with you in a way that would be beneficial for you and for me, because we get done what we want to get done. And I've found a lot of usefulness in that already, because I do a lot of negotiating and mediation, and it's helped me really think about, and sometimes on the fly, think about how to frame something so it can be heard and engaged in. So, yeah.
Not to get off on a tangent, but as you were describing that, I was thinking back again to my banking days, and that's where I got heavily involved in understanding some of the art of negotiation. And there is an art to it in that you do have to appreciate what the other side, either how they've traditionally operated or what they might be strategically thinking about. And the more you can be informed about where they are in their effort and their thoughts and prosecuting their plans, the better off you're going to be for winning the negotiation you're into, because you can be the solution, you can be the fit, you can be the assistance they might be looking for.
Yeah, if I can identify your interest and I'm clear about my own, then I can come up with multiple positions that would meet both of them. And and nobody likes that tension when you're starting to divide the pie up. You want that to be a very brief period because it puts tension on the relationship. So if I can think that out well and I can parse that with you, when I make an offer, I can make an offer that both speaks to your interests and mine. Mm-hmm. And if you can get more than you thought you could, you're going to be much more excited about dealing with me and progressing in it. And that's a large part of my work. I do a lot of negotiating because I'm usually doing strategic implementations, and it depends on other people's input to make these implementations valuable. And so doing that, knowing that, it's helpful.
Dan, back to the entrepreneur community, what are some of your experiences and observations with I don't know if there is such a thing as a normal founder owner, but for the guy that is that, who had the idea, brought it to life by the creation of a business, what are some of the high points? What are there's a good and a bad to my question here. The good things that these guys bring to the table, but inevitably there's some detractors that sometimes hold them back from really maximizing the opportunity. So what have you observed in that way?
Well, I've had just personal experience with that. I think, first off, the saying that's lonely at the top is bullshit. It is if you want it to be. But most entrepreneurs, because they're afraid of losing something, tend to play their cards so close to the vest that their team has to guess what's most important to them, or they find out because of reactions that they go through when that an owner goes through. Like he starts to, if I'm an owner and I react to something that you think's a good idea, react meaning defensively. People take that, oh, I shouldn't have offered this, and then they start to back off. So just personally, I think questioning your own mindset and asking yourself, like, what is your purpose? Is my purpose to bring something new or beneficial to a service or product to my audience? Or is it to signify my brilliance? And that's a subtle distinction. How much is my identity tied up in this? And how much am I really committed to the success and the impact and that can get confusing along the way. So having a consultant, a coach, or a team member or members, having the team tuned up because they're anchored in the outcome of what you're about rather than the need to identify with it or to I'm doing this because it makes me look good or makes me a thought leader or whatever that is, whatever's going on for the person. That's usually a struggle. And if people can get their head around that, they can align the team. But if I'm a leader, if I'm a entrepreneur and I'm doing this because I want to be the smartest guy in the room and I hire somebody who's smarter than me, I'm going to be threatened. But if I'm doing this and I'm going to fight with them and I'm going to become a bottleneck and I'm going to undermine and sabotage my own success and I'm going to wonder, why can't I find somebody who can join me and help me make this happen? There's just nobody out there. I guess I'm the only one. If I can break through that, then what's going to happen is the project's going to explode. It's going to be most likely much more effective, efficient, and impactful because I've included other intelligence and specialties and wisdom in the creation and delivery of the product or service. Mm-hmm. So and that's I listen for that quite a bit. Like, what's this person aiming at? Because whatever they're aiming at the the hierarchy of concerns will come off of what you're aiming at. I had a guy who was a brilliant consultant. I'll never forget it. And we were out swimming one time in Hawaii, and I realized when we were swimming that he was wearing a hairpiece. And I just asked him. He got so mad at me. I said, "What are you mad? Why are you mad? Right? Why are you mad?" As you can tell, I'm not too conscientious about that. But I didn't pursue it because I didn't want to upset him. And later on, he basically, I ended up having to let him go because he went out on his wife with a client, and when I asked him why, he said because it made him feel younger, which is exact. If I had started, I realized if I would have had that conversation back on the island, I might have intervened in this, or it would have been a whole different world. So that's where I started thinking about why is this person doing what they're doing, and that's a big deal. That's a big question.
Well, for the entrepreneurs that I worked with in my banking days, and I've carried it forward, there was, and I observed a very similar thing. Some call it, I had a guest on this show recently, he named it, he called it founderitis.
Right on.
It's that pride of authorship, and some go so far as to call it ego, that nobody can know this product or this idea better than I do. It's mine. I created it. And, don't challenge me on this idea. And, that is a very limiting mindset just from the get-go. And it's important that someone who really says, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to build a business around this idea, You've got to be willing to take on and bring others into the tent, and they may have better ideas. It's still for the betterment and purpose of your original idea, but a slightly different way to do it, a slightly, better element that can be added to the recipe there.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of during the 2007-8, just before that, the crisis, I was working with a bank, and they were doing a lot of subprime loans. And they had a young guy come on, and he took on jumbo loans. So they had subprime business, and they were doing so well in the jumbo loan side that they were taking the money and bundling it and doing more subprime loans. And during the process, I was hired by this young guy because he realized what they were doing, and he wanted to renegotiate his contract with them because he was only making about $300,000 a year, and then there were no distributions, and it was hard to track the distributions because of what the bank was doing with the money. And I'll never forget, I got into the negotiation. We got to the point where we had a deal, but in the process, my client was so offended by the way that the bank was handling it. I remember him getting upset, and he was going to blow the deal up. So I stopped there. We're at the table, and I just stopped everything and said, "Can I have a moment alone with my client?" And I went to him and I said, and they said, sure. They left the room. And I asked this kid, I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I am not going to have them dictate terms. I don't care if I get what I want or not." I said, "So what you're saying is you really don't want to be wrong?" He goes, "Yeah, I don't." I said, "Would you let me be wrong for you?" And he said, "Okay, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you go away. I'll make the compensation. You give me permission to do it. I'll do it. You don't have to do it." And that worked for him. And we closed the deal. But he was going to leave $2.5 million on the table just because he didn't want to be wrong. And that's where I really started cluing into this, right? Like, holy Toledo. I mean, so I'll be wrong all the way. You're going to give me money like that. So.
Yeah. Well, and the flip side of that coin is I have had experience with entrepreneurs who were very savvy. They said, "Yeah, I've got an idea and I've carried it up to this point, but I'm feeling the pressure. I know I've hit the invisible wall. I need to get somebody else in here to do things like." And literally, I've had some I've known that have said, maybe I'm not a CEO for this bigger enterprise I've created. I need to go hire a CEO.
Oh, that's a great founder right there.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you can get philosophical and get spun up on word salad about what that means. Well, being the owner visionary of a, $100 million pie, where you've only got maybe a 51% interest in it, well, that's still a better deal than being 100% of a $10 million pie, you know?
That's right. If you get them to see it, normally they'll get off it, but it does. That's the art. The art of listening, I think, for me has been the key. Where I've gotten more effective, the more I've been able to listen with intent. Like, what am I here for? What did this guy hire me for, or gal? What future am I listening for? Because that informs how I'm going to speak with them or how I'm going to engage them. And I think every entrepreneur ought to be tuned into that. Most entrepreneurs don't. They're so caught up in the business, they don't think about how they need to listen for the business. And the more they can get that lined out, the easier the easier it becomes. It becomes more exciting because they can find possibility where they didn't see it before.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's how I see myself, as just a sounding board to help tune their listening toward the vision they initially declared was important to them.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's the really big distinguishing mark between those of us that are out in the market as business advisors and coaches, because there's a lot of people that'll show up, and if a business owner thinks they need help, you'll get process, you'll get some systemization, formulas and SOPs and frameworks and RACI charts and all these other things that are solutions for what might seem to be symptoms of the problem. But that's no different than going to the doctor and just have him throw a bottle of pills at you without really knowing and spending the time to figure out what's really wrong. And I think I've always valued that as a bit of an art to what I try to do for clients, to really listen to what they're doing. And I had one client, and I'm not going to give too many details. I certainly don't want to break confidence and divulge, but let's just say he was in a partnership. He had half of the business, certain functions and responsibilities were his, and kept professing that he was always frustrated with the people that would get hired to support his part of the business. Mm-hmm. And sadly, it took me way too long, but we finally got to the root of it. The real issue was he hated doing training. He didn't want to teach anybody anything about his way of doing the work that was needing to be done. And he found 1,000 reasons and ways not to do that. And I had evaluated that he had people on the team that were going to be certainly capable in this particular function. I had a lot of firsthand knowledge of, and so it wasn't a hard thing for me to see and evaluate. And I finally told him, I said, all right, let me change hats. What if I train your people? I think I hear and know what you want to do, and I think you have the people already that are capable of doing this. I'll do the training. I'll spend time with them, and I'll get them ready to go. And that became our fix for it. So by getting them fully up to speed and fully indoctrinated in his standard of how he wanted to execute, which is no harm in that by any means. Now he was free to go do other things that were going to be more valuable to the business.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what you just named is one of that's really common, right? I just don't want to take the time. And what a great opportunity for us, right?
Yeah.
Because you can relieve that entrepreneur from that tension, and they can go be more creative, and then you can organize you can align the organization and train it to keep up with them. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Great.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, I think we're about up on time for this episode. I've really appreciated you sitting in. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more about your work.
We have a website, takenewground.com, and there's all kinds of information there, including the 2 public trainings we do. We have our clients send a lot of their executives to our leadership intensive, which is a 4-day intensive called the Revenant Process. And we get a lot of their top executives come through the Intrepid, which is the Academy for Effective Leadership, where we train very deeply in the way we listen and intervene. It's a 60-day program. Those are there. And there's a free ebook I wrote many years ago for ESPN when they were being merged into Disney. It's called The Change Imperative. And it's gotten a lot of traction. So it's there for as an offering if they would like to get that. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me there too.
Very good. Well, as always, folks, we will have those links in our show notes. So please, when you get to a safe place and can hop down and look at the notes, you'll find the links there for Dan. But Dan, one last time, thank you, man, for sitting in. Really enjoyed this. Appreciate it.
Doug, thank you. Great time. I appreciate it.
And I do want to remind everyone that we do have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Go over there, check out our archives. We are in the 400s in our episode count now, so we've got a lot of great stories, a lot of great information to be shared. Would love to see you over there, and drop me a line, leave me a comment. Let me know if you've got an idea for a new show or another idea that we haven't explored yet. And if you need to get a hold of me, just hop over to my website. It's simply at dougthorpe.com. Would love to hear from you. And again, happy to do a free discovery call. Just see where you are with your work and your position in life and or your career stage, either way. But I think that's it for now. We're going to call it a day and tell you go out there and make it a great one.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.